Hello and welcome to my stream. I'm Victoria and I am so happy you're here today as I'm going to talk about such a variety of books. I read a lot of non-Christian and Christian books, so I want those who are into either or to just listen and to maybe get an understanding of these type of books, because I feel like a lot of these can be loved by all people. I choose things that are clean, but there is going to be something in here that maybe is something, because it's a true story, might be hard for people, but I'll get to that. This time of year, we have a lot of spooky things. This is an interesting book because it is by the same author that did the Annabelle Lighthouse book that I had read. And I feel like there are certain things in these stories where you could tell it's the same author, and they were a little similar in tiny instances, but this was way better and the story is different. You could tell. I guess she has like her signature. And I've only read 2 books by her. So this is about Ava Kuhn. Now, in the 1930s, she is found as a 13-year-old dragging an axe, and she's all bloody, and people think she murdered her whole family, and she's in shock. She blocks out a lot of the memories, so she doesn't remember a lot from that time, and people in the village where she lives by Lost Lake, they're all blaming her. They don't have enough evidence against her. So she grows up, and now she is a young woman. And there is another murder that takes place to a similar form of how her parents and her brothers had been murdered. So she goes into hiding, and there is a bit of a love story. It's not pronounced, but her love story, it's very unique and it's different. And I think that it was sweet. So the other part of this story is more modern time, and you have Arwen. And yes, she is named from Lord of the Rings, and Ren is what she is called by a lot of people instead of Arwen. And she lives with her father and her brother, but she mainly hangs around her best friend since she was a child. And there is this 6-year-old girl who goes missing, and it is near Lost Lake, and so everyone's been on a search for her, and she really wants to find this young girl, but in doing so she starts to find a lot more about the mysteries of Lost Lake and even a bit of her own story. I thought this tied in very well. Obviously the stories are not really connected, just so you know. It's like both are unique, so it's like reading 2 books in one, going back and forth. It makes you want to know each story, and you're like, go back, I want to know what happens next, and then you're like, oh, but now I want to know what happens here. So I love how that happens, going the back and forth between times. And it's not really finding out a mystery of Ava Kuhn in modern times. It's more of her mystery is known in that area. Slightly gruesome because there are talks of how people are murdered, and it's sad. There is a missing girl, so there is sad things that go on there. There's a lot of other things I can't say because they'll give spoilers. It is a clean Christian thriller. There is some talk about faith, just so you know, in this, but it is really well written, and I had fun reading this, and I think I read this in 2 days. I will say though, it took me about 75 pages to get into this book. I could have given up on it because it was a little slow at first, but then it gets really good. So give it a chance. I guess they call this a romantasy. I haven't read a lot of romantasy, slightly historical fiction too, but no, it's not really, because there's a lot of fantasy in this. But Half a Soul, I had been wanting to read this for a little over a year. This is part of the Regency fairy tales. Half a Soul it's very interesting. I didn't really understand actually a part of the beginning of what was going on. The process is that the main character, whose name is Theodora, they call her Dora, she had been a child when someone from the land of fairy comes to London area. There's something that happens to her that causes her to lose half of her soul. So she is missing these emotions that most people have. She and her cousin, they go in search for husbands as they are now coming out into society. Dora's a little bit older than her cousin Vanessa, and they're trying to go into high society, trying to find someone who will marry them. And Dora is kind of like, no one's gonna marry me. But while there, they each meet 2 men who are good friends, and one of them has some magic about him, and he is taken to Dora, but I feel like he's not treating Dora that well. Like, people love this romance story. Now, it took me a while to get into this book, and I was kind of disappointed by that because I wanted to enjoy this from the get-go, and I didn't. But I did like it as it went on. It just wasn't something that drew me in as much as I hoped. There's a lot of talk about workhouses and children and labor trafficking with these children. So there is this man named Elias, and he's a little bit toxic to me. I think that he gets sweet as you get into this book, but just certain things he says, I'm just like, what did he say? And it kind of can go over your head. I don't think people are going to capture some of the things he says and it won't like make sense to them. I think that's why I didn't like this book as much as I hoped. I think later on the relationship gets better with how they talk to each other. And maybe it's just like how a lot of people are when they meet people and they kind of tease them because they like them. But I think that's like kind of inappropriate. The point of this story is Dora wants to find her other half to try to be her full self, but she also needs to find a husband. So that's the point of this book. But then I read the novella that is supposed to be a prequel, and it's like only like 40 pages or something. The Lord Sorcier. I didn't really like this one that much, but there's a lot of talk about war in this, and it just talks about how the two men that I just mentioned, how they became friends during the war with Napoleon between England and France. And so that's what this one is about. It is a nice way to get their backstory. So I did like that I read this because I was going to be like, oh, maybe I'll read the whole series and then read this. But I like that I read this after the first book. Let's talk about something cute, okay? Let's talk sweet things. Very nice. Let's go into my wonderful bingo card. I have been saving the bingo for this book. Let's put this in the orange spot. This has orange all on the cover. Look at all the pumpkins. I could not find a physical copy of this very easily at all. Backstory real quick. I have not bought anything from Amazon since March. I have completely taken it out of my life. So I don't read Kindle books. I don't do Amazon. So I bought this on eBay because I could not find this in the library. I couldn't find it at Barnes and Nobles. And so I found it on eBay and it was the only copy I could find. And I was like, I'm glad I found this. This was sweet. This is by a Christian author and she does use the word almighty in this like twice or thrice. The point of this book, it's a retelling of the Cinderella story. And it was really cute because she has a bakery. She runs her father's business so she could support her stepmother and stepsisters. And she meets this man who comes in named Ever. And he has so many little cute puns. So he loves the things that she makes and he starts to get to know her. And he has had his family after him to get married. So you know the Cinderella story. I don't really have to say anything, but it is definitely cute how the relationship builds over time. She has a close friend and her mother that are dressmakers that are in a shop next to her shop. So that is very cute too. She has her own little pumpkin field where she gets stuff to make her pumpkins because this is her busiest season is in the autumn time. And she cares for so many people. She is very caring and she is very forgiving and kind to her stepmother and stepsisters, even though they walk all over her. I loved this. I was really surprised. I thought, okay, this is just going to be a cutesy little story. I'll probably be like, all right, but I loved it. It was very sweet and it was a quick read. Memory Making Mom. This had been on my to-read list for several years and I said to myself, I need to just read this. And it was very cute because it's all about how you as, if you're a Christian mother, specifically, it talks about ways that you can enjoy different aspects of bonding with your family and doing different things that make memories. There is a lot of stuff about God in this, just so you know. She talks a little bit about her time as a mom, but she also just encourages people like, oh, here are some ways that you can make traditions in your house if you don't have any. And she gives some examples from herself, from her family members, from friends that she hears things about. For me, I feel like I should have read this when my older two kids were a lot younger, but we do have some traditions and things that I do on a regular basis, such as read to my whole family. But now that I have a little one and I am like doing motherhood all over again in a way, this is just a reminder and I think it's good for if you have young kids. I am part of two book clubs. One is a bunch of women that I used to work out with and the workout group closed, but we still get together in different ways. And one of them's like, hey, do any of you read books? And a whole bunch of us are like, yeah. So the book that was chosen, it was voted on, was My Friends. This is not my first Frederick Bachman book. When I found out that we were going to read this, I wasn't really in the mood. I was like, okay, this is a summer book. Now we're in autumn. Just based off of the cover, I based that. But this was actually a very lovely book. I would have rated this higher, except for the fact that there was a lot of bad language in this book. I don't like bad words, guys. It's just how I don't say bad words. I don't like hearing it. I cringe when I hear it. So when I read these words, I'm like, I don't like it. So yes, but the story is very nice. This is about a girl named Louisa. She loves this one artist. It is an artist that inspires her, and he is going to have a gallery. She wants to see the art, but she also wants to make a difference, and she wants to be noticed, and she is an orphan. She's going through a lot of things, and she comes across the artist himself in a weird and unique way. And the artist has a best friend. Actually, he has several best friends, but he has one that he's very, very close to. And this best friend has to find this girl because the artist has a very important thing for her. There is a specific painting that she really wanted to see in person that he had done. So when she's starting to go away, this best friend finds her, and he is a teacher. So you have this young girl who is about to turn 18 and this man who's about 20 years older. They find one another and they become kind of like a mentor and mentee relationship, like a father-daughter type of relationship. They go on this little adventure, they get to know one another, and the whole time Louisa's like, tell me about the artist, tell me stories. And so he backtracks and tells stories from his childhood while also asking Louisa about her life. So we find out a little bit of both of them and what they've gone through, the connections that they're able to make because of this. There's absolutely nothing sexual in this book, but there is talk about gay relationships and lesbian relationships, nothing more than stating someone that's attracted and in love with someone who is of the same gender. Beyond that, it's the story has nothing to do like really of those things. It's very filled with friendship, funny things and sad things. There are a lot of things that these friends have gone through. It was pretty heartwarming, actually. There is some violence in this. There's talk of death, but there is actually a lot of faith talk in this too, about like, oh, do you believe in God? And so they have conversations about these things, and they talk about like everything, and it's very nice to just be in on their conversation because it's a little bit raw. And there's some bullying in this as well. There is death, so there's talk of grief and how these people handle grief. That brings me to The Witch of Blackbird Pond. I had thought I read this in middle school. I might have. Nothing stayed with me. I probably, back then, I didn't really care too much about reading, but it might have been that my best friend in middle school had been reading this, and she used to tell me about some of the books that she was reading. So that could have been the situation. I always thought this was about actual witches, so that's probably why I didn't read it, because my mom was very like, you can't read anything about witches. But this is about the time period of when witch trials happened, so it doesn't mean that people are witches. This story is about young Kit. She is an older teen. I'm gathering that she's like 17, maybe 18. And she grew up in Barbados. She is traveling now to Connecticut. And the reason why is because her grandfather passed away and she has only a couple family members left, and they live in Connecticut, but they're Puritans and she is not a Puritan. So when she gets to Connecticut, she realizes that there are some strict rules, and she is a loyalist to England while the Puritans are a bit rebellious against England. So there's a lot of talk about the political period, which might go over some kids' heads if they read this, but as an adult reading this, I understand it a little bit better. There are also some tales of love in this, and it also gives you insight of what maybe a young girl would have gone through depending on who she hung out with and associated with, and maybe even some of the skills she learned over time, and how that could be used against her just because of gossip and people creating their stories. Now, there's the talk of witches is in this because there is a Quaker woman that lives out in the woods, and Quakers, it's so interesting to me because this is a historical book, but they do paint Christianity in not so good of terms, because when you think about the gospel, it's supposed to be where you're supposed to help the widows, you're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. Yet these Puritans, they think this Quaker woman is a witch. She is the witch of Blackbird Pond, this woman that lives in the woods. Kit starts getting to know this woman and makes a friendship with her, and that's a bad thing because all the Puritans are like, no one's allowed to see her or associate with her. But yeah, so there are tales of her cousins and herself falling in love with men, because in that time period in the 1680s, women were just known to have to get married and have to have a household. It was rare for one to not do that. The only thing I didn't like about this is they were talking about possibly having to skip celebrating Thanksgiving, and they had prepared pies and a meal. Back in the 1680s, there was no established Thanksgiving. Even though people will talk about the original Thanksgiving between the Pilgrims and the Native American Indians, that meal didn't mean that they celebrated it afterwards every year. That was not the case. And I even stopped reading it and I looked at my husband, I said, they mention celebrating Thanksgiving in here, and I know for a fact that Washington's Thanksgiving address wasn't until the 1780s. And I said, and then Abraham Lincoln made it an official holiday later on. And I said, that's when in the 1860s, late 1860s, is when it was made a holiday with a meal and stuff like that. It was always just like a day of prayer once Washington made it an official thing. Anyway, I love the history of Thanksgiving. So I was kind of like annoyed that this woman did all this research for this story to find out actual political names even that she brought into it and other people, but she didn't research how holidays were celebrated back then, or if they were celebrated even. That just lost me a star. I'm so sorry. This could have been a 5-star read, honestly, because it was just really good. I read this in a whole day. It's like 250 pages and it was very good. I loved this story. I think this would be good for girls that are like in their older teens. I think would be really into this, would understand it a little bit better. So this book I had to read for another book club. And this is a book club I've been a part of for a little over a year now. So this was a good pick, and I'm glad that I found this at a secondhand bookstore. The last book that I'm going to talk about is Tell Me Everything. Now, there are other books with the same title. This one is specifically by Erica Krauss. So this is about a private investigator. She talks about how she became a private investigator, stating how she just has one of those faces where people just tell their whole stories to, and they start crying and telling her everything just because she looks like she is someone to just pour things out to. And I know these people. I feel like I could be this because I've had it happen, but my mom, everyone tells their problems to my mom. Everyone, strangers all the time will go crying to her in bathrooms. And this like is a real thing that people sometimes go through stuff like this. This is a lawyer hires her because he starts telling her something and then says, you know what, I would like to hire you as a private investigator. So she investigates a story. Now this is filled with all the content you can think of. And I'm stating that because this private investigation is a real story about real people and the things that they have gone through. So this is about, she investigates football players at a university that gang raped a girl at a party. So she talks to the players. They just like let everything out. She talks to coaches. She talks to the people at the party. She talks to the victims. So this is a very intense story with a lot of content. This is something I'm used to reading because I work for a nonprofit dealing with fighting sex trafficking and labor trafficking situations. Because of that, I read these books all the time. This one is not about sex trafficking. It's about sexual abuse. So if this is something that is hard for you, this was hard for me even at times. She actually talks about her own story of sexual abuse that she went through as a little girl, and it was horrifying. And she doesn't give details of her abuse, which is so wonderful. She doesn't even give full details of the abuse of these other girls, but she does mention some of what they go through and some of the things they endured. So there is a little bit of talk of how they were abused. And there is also talk about escort service that is hired at one point, and she talks to a woman that runs this escort service, learns a lot of things about sexual situations. So yes, this is raw, but the way that she goes through this, telling her story with the investigation back and forth, and she even puts in some historical things about private investigators that once existed, and everything tied in so really well. Her writing was so fluid and so wonderfully done. I loved this book so much, even though it has so much content and it has language in it as well. But she also talks about her own love story, which is like so interesting because she felt that she was undeserving of love, and she was told that by her own mother. And so she also tries to always make a good relationship with her mom, who treats her terribly. The person that she is in a relationship with even tells her, like, why do you try so hard with your mother? And so it makes her understand the victims she talks to because she has so much trauma. And oh my goodness, it was just so good, so sad. And yes, sometimes I read books with content in it because I have to. And because I feel it teaches me things about real life and how I want justice done. And these universities that get away with just letting football players and different sports players slide when they abuse these women in horrible ways, and that no one really does anything about it. So this was excellent. I almost gave this 5 stars again because of the content. I did not, but it would have been easily a 5-star read if I didn't rate down because of content. I gave this 4.25 stars. So while I did read some other books, I will bring them up next time because this is getting so long and I really love talking about these books, and I think this was a good variety to talk about, and I'm really glad that I was able to tackle my list even more while adding on. I have been doing such a great pace, and you guys get this pretty much a week ahead is when I record these. You know, you don't know all of the ones I've read beyond that. So I think that that is fun, and I hope that you watched my vlog and liked it too. Maybe I'll do more in the future. Let me know what you think. I have been only on BookTube for a little while. My main channel, I did do some of that in the past, but I love doing this. This is so much fun. This channel is like my baby, and there are like no viewers for it. And I thank those who comment, and I have people that comment like every video, and you mean so much to me. So thank you for your support. Even though I don't have a lot of followers here at this channel, I love the interactions that I've made. You guys are amazing. So keep reading, and thank you for watching and commenting. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Bye.